We've seen 100, 200, 300 families, maybe even more. We've seen
saying, hey, I have this business idea. Do you want to fund it? Hey, I have this venture. Do you want
this ownership in a trust. If something happened to them, proverbial get hit by a bus or hospitalized, does the value...
We all exit our company eventually. The question is, will it be on your terms or someone else's? Strategy matters. Timing matters. The right partner changes everything. Brought to you by Meritage Partners. Here is your host, Brian Franco, author of The Inevitable Exit. This is the M&A Guy Podcast.
Welcome back to the M&A Guy Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Franco, and today's episode is titled Wealth After the Exit, How Sophisticated Families Think About Capital, Risk, and Legacy. In this episode, I'm joined by a very special guest here, Michael Schulman with Cerity Partners. And he works with founders, executives, and sophisticated families on investment strategies, wealth management, and long-term financial planning. So it's going to be a great episode. We're going to dive into Michael's unique experiences and perspective of what happens after the transactions and why business owners transition from operating companies to managing capital and legacy. Welcome to the M&A Guy Podcast. How are you?
Thank you, Brian. Terrific.
Yeah, good. It's
great
good
to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you again. A little overcast today. Usually we have bright sunshine glaring, but
we're on the water.
We're still on the water. Yeah. But in this episode, I wanted to focus really in, what most founders spend decades building, and that's their companies, that's their businesses. And, these businesses produce a particular amount of income that produces and provides them a lifestyle they desire. But when you think about, who is spending the time to protect that asset and the wealth that they've created, those are two very different topics.
Right.
Wealth creation and then wealth preservation and protection. And so I think it's unique because the irony is we see clients that want to sell their companies. When you ask them why, they said, well, when we bootstrapped this company, we didn't have much to lose. So we gave it all we had. But now that this business has generated the wealth that we've accumulated, they look at the business and say, this is a major risk to the wealth that we generated.
And they're trying to grow the business, build value, as you said.
Correct.
Your role on the investment banking side is to help them maximize the sale.
Precisely.
And a large part of our role is goals-oriented, hand-holding them. But once you maximize the sale, we want to help you preserve or keep as much of that after taxes. It's what you keep after taxes for yourself and the next generation that really matters.
Yeah, because we like to, at the country club, wherever, we like to talk about headline valuation. But no one, you ever notice, no one ever says, oh, this was my net proceeds.
Right.
But that should be the focus.
The
Not the
clients
headline.
will sometimes say, hey, we at Cerity Partners, in the transaction, we saved them $6 million or $10 million or however much in taxes through appropriate planning.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to drive this point home with this episode. So I put together a few questions for us to walk through and talk through. But you've obviously spent years and years working with entrepreneurs from the wealth creation standpoint. But in your experience, what changes psychologically and financially once a founder or an entrepreneur experiences that liquidity event? Psychologically, what happens?
So from our roots, our office here on the West Coast and Cerity Partners across a lot of their offices and practices, we manage for a lot of business owners, business founders, business owners, also C-suite executives, even other financial professionals. Yeah, because, if there's a venture capital manager or hedge fund manager or private credit manager, they're focused 14 hours a day on their hedge fund, VC fund, private credit fund. So we handle everything else and help them with the financial planning, the trust estate planning, all that. But with founders, they've spent so much time growing that company. That company's like their baby.
It is.
They've grown it. Often they've spent more time with their company than their own children.
Mostly.
But your question specifically was on the psychology. And what we found is people are people and the psychology doesn't change. We have families that are business owners, super successful, are still in the same house that they raised their children in, and the children have left. Maybe one child is still there. But if they didn't spend a lot through the years when they gained, they're not going to be spendthrifts when they sell the company. And they're usually thinking about children, grandchildren, next generations, charity, nonprofits, donor advisor funds. On the other hand, look, people are people, like I said. And if someone's always lived on leverage and spent and always used credit and borrowed because they had the means to, if they come into a liquidity event, usually that psychology and that means doesn't change. And so they still will try to maximize what they can buy. Maybe not only did they change primary homes, but they now have a third and a fourth home. So the psychology of people doesn't change. We understand that. We work with a lot of different people. We have a lot of families. We tell our clients, you are one family. That's what you see. We've seen 100, 200, 300 families, maybe even more. We've seen millionaires, decamillionaires, centimillionaires. Cerity Partners is like over 40 billionaires that we manage for. So we understand people, we understand the multi-generational, but we also understand how to handhold, how to plan, figure out your priorities when you come into extra wealth and say, okay, how much do we want to set aside for children, grandchildren? How much do you want to spend? Do you want another home, a car? Do you want to invest in another business? Because a lot of entrepreneurs, when they sell their business, they're still young enough. They're in their 30s, their 40s. We have a number of clients like that. Maybe 1 year, 2 years, they sit on the sideline, but then they're itching to start something else. They just can't help it.
No,
Again,
they
it's the
want to build.
psychology. It's the psychology of the entrepreneur. Like I said, the psychology doesn't change. We understand that. And, we appreciate that, like the variety in our clients, and we love our clients.
I agree with you. I think the psychology doesn't change, and the human's the human, and they stay consistent throughout. But what I find is that there is a sense of peace to de-risk and to have that liquidity event, because most of their wealth has been trapped in that one asset class, which was their company. And so when they do that, they think a little bit differently, because now they're sitting on a million, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that they weren't before. And so their role shifts too, because they go from wealth creator to really wealth preservation. And where do they reinvest that money or not? And to your point, younger clients, let's say sub 50, they do have that itch to get back into something. Maybe it's for themselves. Maybe it's a family member or a close friend. And we always tell people, though, don't do anything for 12 months. Don't do anything for 12 months. And I always had the
I
same
think
rule.
that's a good rationale, psychology.
Yeah, I think so too, because I would never win the lottery because I don't play. But if I did, and if I did win, I always told myself, hey, I wouldn't spend $1 for 12 months.
But part of that, I understand what you're saying, and it's a great advice. Don't do anything for like 12 months. But when we're working with a client, we'll also prep them, but we'll try to prep them way ahead of the liquidity event.
Because they're going to see so many PPMs, and everyone is going to come out of every corner saying, hey, I have this business idea. Do you want to fund it? Hey, I have this venture. Do you want to fund it? And so this is what I mean.
Right,
in terms
exactly.
of investing into annuities, that's smart. Move forward. You need to have your strategy and your plan. You need to execute. But when it comes to,
it doesn't have to be an exact annuity.
Exactly.
Anything that's as investment growth or income,
correct,
whatever's tax efficient.
And to better define that 12-month kind of no investment rule is really, I'm talking about really alternative assets. Starting another company or investing in a privately held company, because they're going to see more opportunities at that moment in time than they probably have in the last 10 years. But yeah, the psychology doesn't change much. It's just you're really helping refine and define what that path forward is, because it is generational wealth that we're ultimately navigating here.
And look, the title of this episode is a really catchy title. It's, like, what do you do after you sell the business? And it's a catchy title, but I like to say, if you introduce me to a potential client, someone that just sold their business for 40 million, thank you. Thank you. That is the second best client you can refer me.
Yes.
The best is if you referred me that same client a year or two before they sold their business. Because they sold it for 40, maybe they're walking away with 26, 27. And if we can step in a year or two ahead, maybe they walk away with 33, 34 million. Maybe they walk away with an extra 6 or 7 million after taxes. We all know how hard it is to make every million or an extra 6 or 7 million. At heart, I'm an investment professional. The tax consultants on our team, the trust and estate people, they can really understand what's necessary to help you save. And that's meaningful. That's
Absolutely.
meaningful to what you keep after selling the business. We always like more runway. 2 years is better than 1 year, but we'll take 1 year.
Yeah.
6 months is better than nothing. Because there's strategies we can employ
Correct.
to, realize losses in investments you do anyway, and you can use those losses to offset taxes. Maybe we put some shares for the children in an out-of-state Nevada trust, and then maybe there's no California tax
Precisely.
or New York or New Jersey tax, depending on
Wherever
what
they are.
high state you're
Correct.
in.
Yes, exactly. Well, I want to talk about risk because we've talked about maximizing the net proceeds and what that looks like, and you gave some great ideas between DAFs and 501c3s and wherever their mind is, right, and their heart is. But from a risk standpoint, when sophisticated families, and you and I both know this, and investors think about capital allocation, how do they evaluate risk differently going through your process and going through your journey? How are you guiding them from a risk standpoint?
So there's many definitions of risk, and we want to understand if someone's very conservative or very aggressive. As I said, that psychology doesn't change, and we're not looking to change people, but we want to understand our clients. They are our friends also, and we want to understand them. But then we also want to explain risk. And, for those that are watching on camera, stocks bounce up and down like this. And for those not on camera, I've got my finger waving up and down like a metronome. But I don't consider the bounciness of market prices as risk. A lot of it is noise. If something goes up 5% or down 10% over time, stock markets tend to go up. Most valuations tend to go up. That's a lot of noise. To me, and I try to define for clients and see if they're on board, risk is really not having enough cash or liquidity to meet your liabilities, not having enough cash to pay the mortgage or the mortgage on the second or third home, not enough cash to, fund the lifestyle for the client. So we always try to say, look, you can be in risky assets or what's considered risky assets, growthy assets that have price volatility in the short term. But if you have enough income generated from real estate or credit or fixed income or other cash flowing entities, or if you can sell off some of that growth and you've got enough liquidity to fund liabilities, you've really ameliorated risk. So once a family knows, hey, we've got enough to cover all costs and liabilities for several years, yes, let's look at growth. So it's not trying to change the psychology of the client, conservative or aggressive. We understand we don't want to change who people are, but we want to define what is risk and what is just noise. And I think that differentiation is important.
That's a good differentiation because entrepreneurs have conditioned themselves to bet on themselves. And some would say that is the most risky approach to wealth creation compared to stocks or bonds or annuities or what may have
It's also
you.
one of the few paths to wealth creation. It's the risky
Correct.
path, but
Yes.
it's that concentration on oneself.
It is. And so they go from this mindset of, like I said, they're conditioned to bet on themselves, which is perceived to be risky to the outside world. But then they're going to shift to putting that risk in somebody else's hands. So sometimes it's counterintuitive to them initially. But, with education and with learning exactly how these vehicles work, they again begin to trust that process and ultimately trust taking that risk from themselves and putting and spreading that risk out throughout. But to your point, risk is subjective, right? Because what's risky to one might not be risky to another, depending on how aggressive they are.
Yeah. And look, we all value our health, and maybe we go to the gym like you do, or take vitamins or watch what we eat. But we also go to the doctor. And we put a lot of our health and trust in the doctor and the exams they perform and the blood tests they perform. And so we rely on their professionalism, and our clients realize that they will rely on our professionalism and our advice and our coaching and building a relationship where we know and understand them. We don't expect all our clients to be similar. They're not. We customize everything, their trust and estate, their financial plan, their investment portfolio. You look across 30 clients, you're going to see 30 different portfolios and 30 different trust and estate plans based on their priorities. But what we try to do is educate them as much as they want to be educated. Some want to hear about it for 5 minutes and they're like, Michael, trust you, just do it. Some want to understand it a little bit deeper. Everyone, though, wants to be heard.
They
As
do.
long as we hear them
Yeah.
and can repeat back what they want,
Yes.
that's a great first step.
Next question. You beat me to this one a little bit. But legacy planning before the exit. You said ideally a year, ideally 2 years. But if you had a year, you take a year. If you had 6 months, you'll take 6 months. What we always advise clients is that they want to pursue and build and engineer their wealth plan, their asset protection plan, their tax planning, ideally before we go to market. And more importantly, before any offers come in. So we're in the same situation as you, where, with some clients, we have to collapse time and move faster. There's no choice. And
Yep.
that's okay. We could work under those confines and so can you. But in a perfect world, 2 years, someone listening to us talking, they think, okay, what are you doing for 2 years? Can you walk us through that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we all know a house sells better with new fresh paint and new carpet.
Yes.
So you're in the business of helping people sell their business and maximize it. And a business sells better with pristine books. So if they don't have a good VP of finance or CFO or part-time CFO, you'll probably advise them, if you have a 2-year runway, to bring that in, get the books pristine. It takes a while, and then you can maximize the value. And so on our end, what we're figuring out is we can take relaxed time to know you, our client, the business owner, the entrepreneur. What do you want to do when you sell the business? Where do you want the money to go? How much do you want to keep for you, for the children, for the grandchildren? You're going to pay some taxes, but we want to minimize that. And we can put plans in place to actually invest what you have and help grow those assets, but also generate realized losses that you can use to offset future capital gains. If you know you're going to sell the business or have, private stock like SpaceX is going to go IPO soon. There are people that are coming to us that have 10, 20 million or more in private SpaceX stocks. It could be worth 20, 40, 60 million. They want some liquidity from that. The more time we have to prep them and maybe realize losses to offset gains, that's real tax savings we can incorporate for them. We can also set up trusts, SLATs, sponsor lifetime access trust, grantor trust, Nevada trust, get things out of state. If you're in a high tax state, plan for family dynamics. And the more time we have, the more harvesting we can do to offset taxes. And the less rushed it is in planning with attorneys.
Which is huge because there is fatigue that can set in with a client and these types of journeys, because when they're going to exit a company in particular, we obviously have a journey and a roadmap for them. We have them busy working on a variety of things, including clean financials and having investor grade financial reporting available on a monthly basis. And so, to then add additional tasks on their plate to collect this, to meet with that attorney, to provide this data and so on and so forth. I agree with you. I call it amortizing that workload over a 24-month period is much more relaxed than trying to do that in a confined 3 to 6 month period.
I like that term, Brian.
Yes.
And you kind of stole the words right out of my mouth. So, I like that term of amortize over 24 months workload. But ideally, we might amortize it over the first 18 months, 12 months, because you're going to be working that last 6 to 9 or 12 months, helping them sell the business. And they will be so busy with you as their investment banker, dating or interviewing potential bidders, and going through that process. And that's tough. Just like selling a house is tough.
Correct.
Selling your business physically, psychologically, mentally, it can be grueling, especially the back and forth, the bidding, the negotiation. And so if we can set up as much as possible on the investment, financial planning, trust and estate planning, long before you get embroiled in actually selling your business, it's easier on us, but it's much easier on you, because that way you're just kind of doing 1 or 2 things at a time rather than 3, 4, or 5 things at a time.
It's a great point. And that time that you could allocate, allows people to move at a more comfortable pace, because otherwise it becomes death through 1,000 questions. And that's where the fatigue sets in. So we're mindful of that as well. And we want to make sure that we're not causing fatigue. We're bringing clarity. We're bringing process and systems to navigate through the transaction.
I like that. Yeah.
And
Processes and systems. And Brian, look, you want to surprise your client with the best outcome possible.
absolutely.
And we want to see that, but we want to avoid unplanned surprises. So if we
Agreed.
can plan ahead of time for that surprise outcome, then it's a win-win.
It's a win-win. Yep,
Yeah.
agreed.
Yeah. And in that case, we're kind of working, cooperating like a basketball team.
We are. We are.
Passing the ball back and forth, but trying to score the points for the client.
Correct.
And it's not just a relay race with a baton. We can work together.
Yeah, because we're not handing off anything. We have different positions on the team, right? We're moving different plays. And I love the basketball illustration for that reason, because we are passing the ball back and forth to one another. And that orchestrated work that we do is important. And this is why having a solid team for an M&A transaction, should include a CPA, knowledgeable transactions, obviously an attorney or law firm, an office, a family office like yourself that can help navigate through complex issues in a variety of states. And when you do that, the client wins every time. And because they are compensating us to help them see through walls, to help them see around corners, because we've been there, we've done that. We know where the dangers are. We know when we got to push hard, and we got to know when to tell the client, okay, this is the time where you take a sigh of relief.
Exactly. I mean, most of your clients will sell one company, maybe two companies in their life, whereas you've seen dozens, hundreds of sales, all different types, through a lot of walls, around a lot of corners.
And so we say the exit is not the finish line. The exit is really the beginning of a new responsibility. And so when you start to think in that context, you then have that responsibility to decide what's next, decide, how you're going to preserve and protect that wealth you've created. And that's why I wanted you on the podcast, because your experience with hundreds and hundreds of families, helping them navigate through these very transactions. And it could be a liquidity of a business. It could be a liquidity of real estate or real estate holdings. It's just private stock. Our work at Meritage Partners is specifically in and around the company. Holistically, you're looking at all of these assets and looking at what is liquidated, why, when, and how. And so we enjoy the working relationship with you guys.
Thank you.
For that reason.
Thank you,
Yeah. So I want to leave us with some closing thoughts here. And, my question is, you have to understand there's founders at different levels of their journey as an entrepreneur. But for those founders building valuable companies today, so they're in the build cycle. What's the most important thing they should be thinking about before a liquidity event ever happens?
Well, if they're in the build cycle, most of their focus is on the company. But I think they should still be figuring out their financial plan, their trust and estate plan, their roadmap. Is their business ownership in a trust? If something happened to them, proverbial get hit by a bus or hospitalized, does the value of the business pass on to the family? Does it go into probate? Where does it go? How does ownership transfer? Maybe they're young enough where they need some sort of regular life insurance. But after they have the liquidity event and they celebrate, maybe they don't need regular life insurance, but they can use something like private placement life insurance, which is more of a tax advantage growth strategy. The planning for multi-generational wealth and asset building. So there's transitions, but you still want to think, as you mentioned, you have a lot of concentrated risk in that one business. So if you talk to us, or hopefully us, but even another multifamily office or a financial advisor, someone who's a fiduciary, where you can get trusted advice and planning, and even help with the investments you do have, even if your portfolio is small, stocks, bonds, maybe some private investments and other growthy investments. And then, like I said, it's good to start planning. You can never start planning too early, because you never know when something's going to come out of left field, like artificial intelligence, and maybe drive the growth of your business. And suddenly you 10x'd and you became saleable much sooner than you thought. Or maybe you get a bid out of the blue. And if you get a bid out of the blue from one firm, you might be tempted to take it. But usually, almost always, we would advise you as our client to, yeah, maybe look at that bid, but let's pair you up with an investment banker
Mhm.
because that one bid is probably not your highest and best offer on your business.
Correct.
So let's pair you with an investment banker. Let's put it to a bidding process. Let's get you a higher valuation.
That's right.
And just as you're a coach for your clients, we try to be a
Absolutely.
coach too. And we're more of a lifetime coach. As you're building your business through the joyous sale and celebration of
Yeah.
that business, and then going forward for you and your children and grandchildren for the generations.
That's right. I love that advice. And I think it's really important that for those builders that are out there, they are keeping these concepts and thoughts that you shared today on their radar and really taking initiative, because the outcome of that work, yes, will be primed and ready for an exit, whether
Mhm.
it's an unsolicited offer or it could be a deliberate approach to going to market. Unfortunately, there's cases where lives are cut short here on earth.
Yeah.
There's cases where you described, that they get hit by a bus analogy. We've had clients diagnosed with Alzheimer's. We've had clients died prematurely at age 50.
Yes.
We've had
That's true.
clients that have, it's sad, a gentleman in his 30s was in a motorcycle accident after he left the office on a Friday, his business on a Friday, and never returned. And so these things we don't want for anybody, but they do happen and they can happen. And so, 2 years out, if you are mindfully and deliberately thinking about an exit, but there's never an too early. Wouldn't you agree?
Agree. Absolutely. It's like people asked me, Michael, when should I start saving? You should start saving yesterday. If not yesterday, then today.
Exactly.
Sooner the better.
Yeah.
And the same thing with just planning. It's just like your business benefits
Yes.
from your 1 month and 5-year plans.
Yeah.
Why not do that with your life? If you're thoughtful with how you do your work and your education and build your business,
Yeah.
put that same preferential thought into your financial life. And I know it may seem like a lot, and that's why we are
Mhm.
there to,
Mhm.
help with that burden, just like your doctor's there to help with your health.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a great way to illustrate it. Michael, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, and love to have you back in the future. I know we'll be working on projects between now and then, but until then, we'll make sure that everyone has a way to contact you in the show notes,
Wonderful.
and that so those that are interested in learning more about the concepts that you shared today, they can take that time and you can have a discovery call with them.
Thank
But-
you, Brian. This has been terrific and enjoyable conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. If you're building a company and want to understand how to create not just wealth, but lasting enterprise value and long-term freedom, start with principles behind a successful exit. We've recently launched Empire Builder System. In the Empire Builder System, we're going to give you virtual training and tools that you could utilize to value your business and assess the transferability of your company. So I encourage you to visit empire-builder.com to learn more, to sign up and get started on that journey. I'm your host of the M&A Guy Podcast, Brian Franco. Until next time, keep building your empire.